Be great. And welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome to Washington Women's Foundation Priority 101 series on adult education opportunities. I hope this is what you were planning to be here for. My name is Maria Colby-Wolf. I'm the president and CEO here at Washington Women's Foundation. And before I get started, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered here on a stolen and unceded Indigenous homeland and in the context of broken treaties and unresolved harms to Native people. We are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and of the Coast Salish, the Stillaguamish, the Duwamish, the Muckleshoot, and the Suquamish, who have made and continue to make their homes here around the Salish Sea. We recognize as well that we live in a nation of wealth, a wealth created by the subjugation and exploitation of African peoples brought to this land through chattel slavery. We honor and uplift the original indigenous stewards of this land and the forced contributions from generations of Africans. This is an acknowledgement of stolen land and stolen labor, and a recognition that the impact of these wrongs reverberates into our present day, and furthermore, that much of the work we do is about righting the repercussions of those wrongs. Our acknowledgement is not the work. It serves only as a first small step in honoring, with gratitude, the land on which we live. The Washington Women's Foundation is a strong and inclusive collective of informed women who together impact community transformation through trust-based philanthropy and community education. We value and encourage active learning, thoughtfulness, and uplifting the voices of those in our community who are experts and leaders in their fields and those who are experts and leaders in their own lives. Through our collective grants, our members learn and invest in 3 different priority areas each year that have been identified by the broader Washington Women's Foundation community and chosen from among the year's themes. This year, our theme of education is interested in exploring adult education opportunities. In 2025, therefore, the Washington Women's Foundation will invest in non-traditional adult education programs and educational opportunities in support of adults navigating the requirements of employment and civic participation. This funding may include immigrant and refugee education services as well. We are interested in learning more about non-traditional adult education programs and services designed to support adults ages 18 and older as they navigate the requirements of employment and civic participation. We have 3 excellent speakers for you today. These speakers are experts, change makers, and leaders in the education field across Washington state. In the end, we'll have time at the end of this of our conversation today. We'll have time for engagement from you and questions from the audience. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hand the microphone off to my colleague, Catherine, who will be our moderator today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Maria. And yeah, thank you all for being here today. We're glad to learn and grow in community. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for the day. And I wonder if, Emily, you'd like to start and share what brings you to this work and who are you? Where are you?
Yeah, so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Emily Ramirez. I am the Director of People and Programs at Global Neighborhood. We're based in Eastern Washington in Spokane, and I've been doing this work for about 4 years now, and it's a huge joy to me. So the programs that we have are it's called Ascend. It's a job training program, and then we also do free ESL education.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome. Manaz, would you go next?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Manaz Ashatu. I'm the Executive Director of Refugee Women's Alliance. We've been in existence for 40 years by this August. And I've been the Executive Director for 11 years and the Board Chair for 7 years for REWA. I came from the finance industry and education industry, and then I got involved with REWA and fell in love with the work and the mission, and that's why I'm here. And we provide wraparound services, different, beginning from English language and employment, immigration, naturalization, youth development, early learning centers, domestic violence, behavioral health, and within all of these programs embedded a lot of training, vocational training, and of course the language training.
Thank you, Manaz, and welcome. And Teresa.
Yeah, my name is Teresa Rosendahl, and I am the executive director and founder of B5 Learning Center here in Kennewick, Washington. So we are also on the eastern side of the state, and I've been doing this work since it started, I guess, and I guess what brought me to it was I worked as a volunteer for the resettlement agency in our area, working with refugee families, and just saw so many unmet needs, and started with an apartment, and we've grown. A lot of our work, we don't have true wraparound services yet. We want to be REWA when we grow up, but we do work, we have services that connect to all parts of the family, from helping parents get their kids ready for school, preschool, things they can do in their home. We have after school programming for kids, and then for adults, most of that's around language training, because you're not going to get a job or go forward without good, strong language skills. And then working into digital literacy and beginning to work with jobs as well. I'm really honored to be with this panel, both other organizations. I have great respect for the work they do. Thanks.
Welcome, Teresa. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, just like to add on to what Teresa is saying, the work that you do is inspiring, and we're so grateful that you're sharing that knowledge and experience with us today. So our next question is kind of define the term. So how do you define adult education in your context and in your work? And what do you wish folks knew about adult education in Washington State? And I will ask you to define your terms a little bit, as I know in every industry there's lots of different terms and things like that. So help us understand what's going on in adult education. And Teresa, I wonder if you could start.
So adult education because all three of us work with refugee communities, it's really important for people to know that when these people come here, one of the first things they do is get connected to caseworkers who make an assessment on their ability to enter the workforce. And usually that means that they're, going to, in that assessment, they're, well, we need to learn English, so there's a language learning piece, and there's a cultural learning piece too. So to me, that's for the people that we serve, those are huge. And then because we live in such a systemic world, we have systems for everything, and a lot of the people that we serve don't come from those kind of worlds. That's part of the cultural learning, but then a lot of those systems have become digitized. So there's that piece too. So to me, that's a lot of what adult education for the communities that we serve, that's where it starts.
Thank you, Teresa. Manaz, what about you?
Well, I think piggybacking on what Teresa said, adult education with refugees and immigrants could be a little bit different depending on, we serve people from all over the world. Our team, our staff speak, many different languages and come from, we have about 58 different languages. However, depending on who we are serving, the adult education could be different. We have, even within the context of English, learning the English. For example, during the time that we had people from Africa was coming, Somalis and Ethiopians, adult education was a little bit different. It was concentrating more on the lower level of English. Now we have people coming from Ukraine, from Afghanistan, and we have different level of classes that we teach the language, but also people who are coming here. They're a little bit in lately, even from African countries and all over the world. We see that a lot of them are highly educated. Some of them understand English and speak English, but maybe not at the same level that it's needed for working. That's why we are teaching in all of our English classes, we're teaching the language of the business, the words and the phrases that they could use in their business. And adult education, as Theresa mentioned, it also means that having access in this world, having access to the computer, the technology, so digital literacy is very important, and all the gamuts of different training that they need. A lot of time, people who come over here, we have about 5 MD PhD working for RIBA right now, and there are people who have PhDs, they're doctors who are working as janitors, working on the at airports and all that, waiting to get to learn the system navigation, as Theresa mentioned, and be able to join the workforce. Now, what we do, we provide different type of training as well, and digital literacy is very important for people, especially right now, for them to access the computer, the technology, and be able to learn. So what's important in being able, if they have the education, being able to get certification from different community colleges or maybe the professional schools, help them get better jobs so that they could establish a better foundation for their lives in here faster.
Thank you. And Emily, what about you?
Sorry, my mute was being crazy. Yeah, Theresa and Manaz, we focus on very similar things. And I think during our ESL program, we also focus on vocational training as well, because that is most people's priority when they come here, is that, you have to work to eat, to live. And so we include that as well. But some of the things that we focus on that is maybe a little bit different about particularly the way we approach education in our job training is we have 3 very clear goals. And so the first one is restoring power and autonomy to people. And some of that is through education, like teaching those systems, like Theresa said, educating them on business language, because if you don't know of the systems, you don't have the power to engage in them. If you only know what your caseworker is telling you to do, you're not going to think that there's other options. So making sure that people have choice within the program of what they want their outcome to be at the end. So we encourage, maybe you want more education, maybe you want to change your career path, or maybe you want to re-engage in what you were doing before, and teaching that culture in the systems. Our next one is, our next goal is building social capital through bonding in our workplace with, we have 40 permanent employees from various cultures. We have 17 different nationalities on staff right now, 7 different languages spoken daily here. So building that wider community network and then bridging to other local organizations or getting them connected with their cultural community. And then also linking to people in the community. So that could be employers, that could be further education opportunities. And there's studies about social capital that show the faster that someone builds those 3 categories, the faster they're able to engage in their new community and have a successful new life here. So that's a huge focus for us. And we do that in a variety of ways. And then the last one is for us teaching economic mobility. And one of the ways we do that is advancement through ESL. And we kind of have a unique approach. We have multi-level classes, so people engage in that community style learning. We pay for certifications applicable to the career, their choice that they're choosing. So that might be a food handler certification, that might be forklift certification. And then one of the things that we encourage is as they move through the steps in our program, they get to train other participants. So they get training experience, and that builds a lot of self-confidence, but it's also a valuable skill they can put on a resume because, like Vanessa said, you have people coming here that have PhDs. You have people coming here that have had, successful careers in education before, and to have to start over can feel really demoralizing. And this is a way to rebuild and restore that power and also just add that to your resume. I have training experience. I have this in the United States. So those are the ways that we approach maybe learning in a different capacity, and have all of it has the same end goals, right? We're all trying to give people education to connect and to live here and to thrive. Um, and I think that we found that these pieces are just really crucial in the way that we approach education, whether that's through our ESL program or our job training program.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, I love the different aspects of how you're approaching this work, and which leads really nicely into our next question about culturally competent services and care. So how does bias show up in adult education? I think there's probably examples from this week that you can you can point to. And along those lines, what do culturally competent services look like in your organizations? And I wonder, Manaz, if you would like to start.
So let me just start with culturally competent services, right? We hire from within the same communities that we serve. So our case managers speak, 58 different languages and coming from the culture, and the concept and the reason for that is that it's very lonely when you come to a different country as an immigrant, as a refugee, and you need someone who, when you're learning the system, you need someone who can respect your culture and your language, and consider what does it take for you as an individual who come from certain country to learn the language, to understand the system and get culturally integrated within the system of the United States. There are a lot of bias with refugees and immigrants because as you know, within the context of education, maybe opportunities don't exist that much. I'm sure that if some of you know, and most of you probably know, that all of us, our work is supported by the grants from the federal and private foundations and also individual donors. There is not sufficient funding to support adult education training, and in addition to English classes, other types of training, the workforce development training, and those that we are talking about. We were able to establish a program that combined employment and housing, because that's another thing, is stabilizing. If you have a stabilized housing, if you have a stabilized life, you can concentrate on getting certification, you can concentrate on finding better jobs. And it was through a philanthropy that we were able to establish that program, and it's been very strong. We were able to get we have a business coach that coaches our participants to how to get within the employment business, write resumes, interview, and also our case managers stay with them for a few months to make sure that that bias that you're talking about, that could take place at the workplace, that people may think because they don't speak the language well, they're not able to perform. Whereas if you have someone who's coaching you through the first few months, you would feel more empowered and you would be able to do a better job. And that's our philosophy about that. We also have a lot of other trainings, such as home health care training, that again supported by philanthropy, so that we can get, people who have been in adult in healthcare in their countries, they can start from there so that they can learn the language and get trained to just start um, in that business, and then gradually they could go, get certification in nursing or other types of education in healthcare industry. Allow them to get to the healthcare industry.
Thank you, Manaz. What about you, Emily?
Yeah, for us, I mean, similar to what Manaz says, having people that represent that community on staff. So, for instance, we had, when the Syrian crisis started a couple years ago, that's a very small population, and we have someone that's Syrian on staff that speaks, that's also Kurdish as well, and we were able to make a connection with the community college, who was able to send us folks that were afraid of connecting at the community college because they hadn't been in an education system like that. It wasn't approachable. But meeting someone that spoke their language, that spoke Kurdish outside of Syria, was the connecting point that they needed to access education. So having that representation, having the people that are, at all levels of leadership represented is so important. And for us, because we're not just, an education facility, we're also a work site. We're a thrift and vintage store. That's that's a large portion of our private funding. So we have, a place like a prayer space, because over 60% of our staff are Muslim. And so we have a welcome prayer space for people to have that cultural aspect of, we're coming up on Ramadan soon. And so there's going to be a lot of prayer time, and we want people to feel like they can take that time for themselves. And I think some ways that I've seen bias come up is, particularly in the last year, from the data we collected, over 80% of our job training participants were women, but not just newly arrived women. They were women that have been here for 2 years or more. So you're talking women that haven't had access to services. And there's a variety of reasons. Some of that is, I think a third of them were single mothers, and their average family size was 4 children. So you're talking about women that don't have access to childcare or the connection to receive childcare, or don't have transportation. There's a large focus on men receiving education first and employment first, which is understandable. They might have more access to language, but there's a huge bias there, because sometimes these women, this is their first time being in a classroom ever. This is the first time engaging in a workplace. So we've seen that come up a lot as far as bias. And I think that tends to just be a natural bias that we're addressing, that's within the refugee and immigrant community here.
Thank you, Emily. I love the different approaches that you guys are all taking to secure great care for your folks. Teresa, what about you?
Yeah, so we I again, listening to them, I wish I had 57 different languages to support my people. And because we're in a smaller community, we do prioritize hiring people who speak the native language of at least one of our communities that we serve. But it's hard to get that. But when you're talking cultural competency, I think that there's a piece that we have that's not connected to just, the familiarity. And I think it's partly because we are located in the community, where the place where the new arrivals make their first home, and we've stayed. We've made that our home too. And we practice community with them in I mean, that's a priority. It's not done perfectly, but it, you know, it comes with showing up at their events and having cultural humility. You know, there's parts of cultural competency that you can learn from a book, and you can learn all about what it means to be Muslim, but how much more impactful it is for that family when you not just are worrying about doing the things that are going to be right so they're not offended, but having a curiosity about what makes them who they are, and a humility, putting yourself in the position of a learner with them. And so we've really focused on building strong relationships in the community, so then they begin to bring people to us. So that's kind of, you know, because we can't provide, you know, the services. We can't hire we're not a big enough organization yet to hire people who speak the language for everyone, but we do. I mean, for some of the services that we provide, like our English program, that's state funded. That's our acronym LEP. We're all LEP providers. That's limited English proficiency. We have state contracts that allow us to provide classes for them. I mean, we have to, when we register people, we have to use the native language. So are we doing that with someone on our staff? Well, over 50% of the students in our program are Spanish speakers. So yes, our registration specialist, she speaks Spanish. It's her native language. So, but you know, we also have Haitian Creoles in our program, and we don't have anyone who speaks that language. So we have to use an over-the-phone interpreter. But again, we're looking for other ways to use AI to do that instead of an over-the-phone interpretation. But at the same time, the piece that's caught by our people is not you know, having the same person, or the similarity. It's the love that it kind of transcends everything else. And so I just I think it's important for those of us who are trying to do this work, and for other people who have an interest, to see these people as whole people, and as people that we can learn from, and not have to think that, oh, I have to know all about you before I can interact with you. I can know a little bit, and you're going to teach me more, because I've got enough cultural humility to say, I need you to teach me. So that's a big piece of it. But I also liked what Emily said, where you know, a lot of our people then are not willing to engage in learning at the college level, because it's very intimidating. So creating that nurturing, welcoming environment means that we're going to be able to serve those people who are afraid of that education system. And so that again requires building community around them, and which leads to all those other things, the wraparound services that we all do, either in a structured way or in a just in a community kind of way. So.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. And you all touched on so many intersections with other systems that are at play. And this is kind of a big question, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how does the education justice system that I feel that you are all a part of intersect or interact with other social justice movements, such as racial justice, economic justice, climate justice, and gender equality? And again, do not need to touch on all of the different systems, but and this is an open question, so I wonder, anyone can begin, and if you have thoughts on that.
I think education, if I can start, education justice for us, I mean, means just what Teresa was mentioning. that it is difficult for some of our participants or the newcomers to go to community college or go to the university. It's important that have someone who speaks the language, or as a case manager or coach, which we have it in our youth development. We have coaches who work with the youth at the high school level to get them to college, and also is to work with the parents of the youth who are in from the ages of 10 and up to college, to learn the education system, because there are education biases in our high school and in our colleges. If the parents don't know how to interact, to speak the language, they cannot interact with teachers. So it is important that someone who speaks the languages of those youth and children be present at, even if it is after school programming, which we do in the school, in the public schools, to help the children and the teacher, as well as the parents. Because if you can't fight for your child, teachers are really inundated with large classes, don't have time to spend additional time on the children whose English are not at par and their parents can speak. So they pay more attention to others naturally because they don't have time. So it is very important that we have people who speak the language, understand the culture, be available to the teachers after school to work with young people, to work with their parents, so that teach them how to get involved in addition to learning English, and what to expect and how to respond. It is also important with our domestic violence, because if you don't know what's available to you, if you're not educated, if you can't speak the language, when you are abused and you're being taken advantage of, you don't know how the system works. You don't know how to get involved with different part of the system that helps the to get rid of abuser or take him to the court and all that. In addition to that, those who are being abused, that's another section of the population that we serve. They need additional education, again, to get into the workforce, even if they didn't have to work before. And when they want to get out of that abusive situation. So there are a lot of, if you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture, a lot of biases that present themselves. Also, it is important, as my colleagues mentioned, that have partnership with the colleges, the universities, and be present there. Also, we can all impact the system. Right now, we're trying to work with University of Washington and other, and other community colleges to bring in more people of color and people from refugee and immigrant communities into the behavioral health system, because we don't have enough of them.
I think that Manaz really, kind of that touched on the key is that in our culture, in our world today, and if you don't, if you don't speak English, and you don't have someone who's there advocating for you, it's so easy to be taken advantage of, and people do it all the time. So that's, so education is key to any of those different injustices, is helping them be able to, the goal is always that we empower them in a way that they can then advocate for themselves, right? But there's language, and then there's culture that gets in the way too, because we don't let anyone stand in our way, but that's not the way other cultures work, right? So I just, as she was talking, people real people go through my head that we've ended up advocating for in just very small ways. And it starts with one person doing one thing for one other person, right? It's not, you build programs because you all of a sudden you realize that you're doing this for 20 different people and you can't keep it up, and there are more people coming. And that's why we need funding, and there's never enough, right? And certainly that's where philanthropy comes in, because it's being able to realize that government programs just aren't going to cut it, really, because they don't want to they limit you from going that extra step that you need to take to stand for someone else. And yeah, it's the work that we all do. I mean, I see you guys nodding, and you realize that it really is. It's about one person whose life you're changing in one instance, and everyone has a different touch point. So it's very personal. It's highly rewarding, but it's also you need a ton of volunteers, which we work with a lot of volunteers to help us do the work. But you also need a lot of resources in order to do that work.
Mhm.
Can I just piggyback on what Teresa said? I think it's thank you, Teresa, for bringing up the notion that the government contracts, we're all government contractors. Government contracts doesn't pay the full cost of service. And we need what do we do? Number one, our staff are not well paid. Number two, we augment the deficiencies in government contract by philanthropy and by major donors. Whereas in a normal, if you're in a business of for profit, then additional funding that you have, you use it to reward your staff. You use it to educate them better, train them better, and you use it in many different ways. Whereas nonprofits really rely on philanthropy to do the job that they're doing, because government contract always is short of covering at least the overhead.
It's the human piece that doesn't get paid.
And the government contract is prescribed. Like
Yeah.
you do only this, you cannot do this, and if you do something, but you know that people that you serve, they need more than what you're providing. But if you don't have funding, you can't hire the staff. How could you do it?
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with both what Teresa and Manaz have said. We face the same challenges. Like, we have a state contract for ESL, but it covers very little of the work that actually happens. And those are looking at going away very soon because of the administration. So, there's things like some of the ways that we try to intersect these we had someone from the Spokane County education system come and do a workshop in our ESL class to explain what are kids learning in K through 6 or K through 5? What are kids learning in high school? What are the outcome goals? How do you ask to make sure that, my kid, they're Muslim, so they're not eating something that's not haram, that's not good for them to eat, that isn't according to their religion? Because I think what all of us are touching on is that knowledge is power, right? And that's really what we're trying to give people, is the power to live a full life here, an educated life that gives them the access and the resources to not only for us to advocate for them, but for them to be able to advocate for themselves or their children. That session, we expected it to be like an hour long. It ended up being 2.5 hours long. People stayed after class to keep asking questions, and we're realizing, how can we continue to be a resource for this community? And those are things like, we take time and pay interpreters and certified interpreters to come and sit in language groups, so people, they're hearing it in English, but also they're hearing it in their language to understand what's being said to them. They can ask questions. So some of this is just so important in the work we're doing that, it does not come from state funding. It's very limited, the amount of people, like Vanessa said, you have this very short list of people you're allowed to help with state funding, and anything else. How do you say no to somebody? I can't say I can't say no to somebody that needs and wants education, we have the resources, so we provide it, and that's one of the reasons that philanthropy and private funding is so important, because it often helps the people that actually have the most barriers and the most bias towards them.
So if I can just jump in on that too, the thing about gender equality too. So we have this state contract, this LUP contract, and it actually was started in our area because Araya was anticipating that we would get a surge of Afghans here. They know that Afghan families are large, and they had learned that our volunteer-led English classes offered childcare. So we negotiated and did a trial pilot project of offering ESL classes, and which has grown into our program, and we're thrilled about that. But the Afghan women didn't come. And why not? We have childcare. Well, I'm still not sure if it was them. Sometimes it was the woman herself. Sometimes it was her husband. Sometimes it was the people around her who were like, you can't be in class with men. And so being a nonprofit who cares about the people in our community, we shifted and we started we restarted basically our volunteer-led English classes, which are not quite as robust. It's only an hour and a half a day instead of 3 hours, but yet the Afghan women are now coming. And I just this morning sat in on a digital literacy class with 3 Afghan women learning how to use a mouse. And it's the most beautiful thing that they're struggling still in so many ways, but they come to class, they have their kids taken care of, and they are learning to use a mouse. So there's the other piece about adult education is that for some of these people, the learning road is rather steep, and they don't have computers in their homes, but they're learning how to use a mouse, and we're hoping that we're going to get some funding to provide laptops that they can have in their homes soon. But we can't even imagine what amount of and how big the barriers are for them to get to a place of gender equity or whatever. But we're committed to people in our community, and so we'll do what it takes. But that's again where you rely on philanthropy to be able to address those issues.
If I can interject, we dealt with the same thing, Afghan community and the cultural barriers. And during COVID, we had to develop remote ESL classes as well. So then we went and did fundraising through the philanthropy to find computers and provide those to our clients. And then now we are even after COVID, especially during this time right now, we're doing hybrid. And so Afghan women at their home, they can participate in English language classes, but if they have the 0 level of English, then it is difficult to teach them. So they have to come to, at least they have to be at first level, to be able to work remote, to learn remotely.
Yeah, wow. I think we can all tell that you guys are doing education, but you're also doing so much more for these families. So it's really amazing to see the breadth of services that you're providing for families. You touched on this a little bit, but I wonder if we could explore more about organizations and programs that you have that are focused on digital literacy and or vocational training, and how what is your perspective on those two elements of adult education and how they interact in your organizations? And Emily, I wonder if you could start.
Yeah, so in our ESL class, we focus a lot on employment-based language, things like we'll have for our higher levels projects that they do together. One that was kind of fun that they did recently was they had a map on the board, and the scenario was that they had a job interview that they had to go to, and they had to navigate the street, the map, the street signs to be able to get to their job interview. So some of that was reading a map. Some of that is reading on a phone or reading the names and following the directions to be able to get to the place. So that's our lead teacher, Daniela, is also an immigrant originally from Brazil, and has found like doing these really engaging scenarios is fun for people and a little bit different than just sitting and learning. It's how do you make this actionable for somebody? So that's one of the huge ways that we do that. We are just getting our digital literacy program started up. We had some computers donated to us, and our goal is to have that available and be a part of our class setup because, I was explaining to someone, if you're not a digital native, it's not intuitive to you to how to use a computer at all. And this is something that I see with Americans as well, because we're so used to using a phone or a tablet that when you have a computer placed in front of you, it's a whole different tool that you don't know how to use or access. And so some of that is, this is how you use a mouse, just like Teresa said. Some of this is, here's how you create an email account. This is how you read an email. They might have the English skills to do that, but they don't have the digital literacy or intuition on how to use those systems. And this is how our world operates. So that's something that we're getting set up right now in our program. And it's just highly important for people to be able to access and have a way forward. One of the things that we changed is we have a digital sign-in for class now. So they actually have to sign in on a laptop versus a piece of paper, because we want to introduce them to digital skills from the beginning. And even as something as simple as typing your name, selecting the time, and then hitting submit, we have volunteers there assisting people, and it takes a while, but this is something that if you go to a job, you're most likely going to clock in on an electronic system. So teaching them from the beginning of entering into English class, we're prepping you for employment from the moment you walk into class and sign in. So I think there's a lot of ways that, when we're approaching education from a vocational standpoint, it's a lot of those small little things. It can even be, you need to show up on time, because if you show up 5 minutes late to work, you're going to get in trouble. So this is like a basic, we're teaching people basic vocational skills through ESL. Not even, our job training program is more intensive, right? But like if we're talking strictly ESL, that those are some ways that we include those vocational skills within, aside from just language lessons or learning. It's how do we practice active skills that are going to be usable in your daily life right now?
Thank you, Emily. I love those small examples that make a big impact. Teresa, what about you?
Yeah, we do a lot of the same things, those small, they call them soft skills, right? That are, everyone needs to learn, but, even things like they've shifted in their English classes to, there's a basket for your cell phone during class time. You can't be on your phone. And that's made a world of difference actually for our students to be more engaged in class as well. But I'll say that being a little bit more new to this, this game and growing, what we've really invested in as well is partnerships. So our digital literacy right now is, we have it embedded in our LEP program. With one of our teachers, she uses computers to teach English every day, but we also have Goodwill, a partnership with Goodwill, where they come in and teach our lowest level of learners an introduction to computers once a week. And then once a week, they also come to our we call it women's only English class, to work with those women on English skills. So that's been a way we've been able to bridge that gap into doing digital literacy without taking the whole burden on ourselves, is finding some good partnerships like that with others like that. And the same with vocational. We have, we're working with WorkSource or the Workforce Development Council and other career pathway services to, and even the resettlement agency to a degree, to figure out how to help our people connect to work opportunities that they might have. And where we can't give, like I just have had a conversation with a woman who comes here. We've just started this, where she comes and spends some time at our space, and people can come and connect with her if they're looking for jobs. And I, but they come to me, right? Or other people who are interested in giving our people opportunities come to me, and I might take them a little ways down the road for that opportunity. And then I'll say, okay, now you need to go to her and let her finish it with you, because I don't have the time. It's time consuming, and I would love to have the time and that be all that I do, but then there's a lot of other things that wouldn't get done. So it's creating those other networks around us too, and working with them well, so that we can hand off people or share responsibility for those people. And then we've started this is with our graduating high school and up people in our program. We've started something called Dare to Dream for our high schoolers. We have some interested businessmen in our community who are bringing other businesses to the table to introduce our kids to what's out there in the world of work, and helping them do practice that resume and interview skills and all those soft skills, so that they can be ready to cross over into the world of work. We've seen how that's hugely important for that age group. All those kids want to work, and it's around here. I don't know what you guys experience, but it's hard to get kids who are younger than 18 jobs these days. And the kids themselves from refugee backgrounds, they don't understand that. They've worked, they've always worked. And then so it's really hard for them to make that adjustment here. But as much as we can, we're trying to get out into the community and find those people who are willing to give maybe a summer job or something else to be able to strengthen our ability to be able to help people find a diversity of work opportunities instead of the one that is usually offered to people. And I don't want to go into that, but and it's same as working with one person at a time. You kind of work with one business at a time, and you nurture them to take one person, and then you find, it's a work in progress, but we're excited about the opportunities and the doors that are opening.
Thank you, Teresa. Manoj, what about you?
Well, I mean, just continuing on what Teresa was mentioning, we had to implement digital literacy during the COVID in all of our LEP classes, and we have separate classes for that. We also have, with that program that I mentioned, we established with the help of philanthropy, It's about partnership, partnering with other organizations, with the community, with colleges, with universities, with professional schools in all levels, from our youth development, which we bring in during the STEM program that we have. We bring in corporate partners to come and talk about different positions that are available so that they could dream about. When in refugee families, everyone is they're very marginalized. There are not, there's not enough funding for them to do anything, go anywhere, dream about anything. So they get really stressed out and they get depressed and they can't dream about what's possible. So what we concentrate on bringing guest speakers to tell them about what's available out there so that they could dream of possibilities. In our adults, with respect to the adult, we have CDL training that we partner again with different schools. We have forklifting. We have for women. We have sewing and different gamut of different type of training that we provide to the professional schools, community colleges, and sometimes universities, and we get involved. I think that that personal touch that our case managers and our coaches and business developers have, insert during their interaction with our clients makes a lot of difference. It's just, you have, as Teresa mentioned, you have to have that personal relationship with them, be able to coach them to, go step by step. So, and then give them hope. Because it's very hopeless at the beginning when you're lonely, when you don't know the system, when you don't have your relatives around you and your families around you. So it's about that personal touch that we all try to provide to our clients so that they feel like, for example, Viva is the place, it's a community space, it's a place that they could feel comfortable, come to talk to our case managers. And and also we are having programs that for example, our International Women's Day, we invite our clients or our funders or community to get them engaged with refugees and immigrants so that a lot of these biases that are happening, as we are hearing about them, is about lack of information. It's about what we provide in addition to our people we serve, what type of information we can provide to the public. So digital literacy, in a way, also has to do with that as well. Yeah.
Thank you all. And I just want to invite the audience. We have time for questions coming up here soon, so feel free to add them to the chat or write them down, and we'll call on you after this next question. So I know we've talked about this a little bit, but advocacy around education is a big topic in Washington State this year, as it is almost every year. But the conversation is mostly focused on K-12 funding gaps across large districts, small districts, rural areas. What is unique about advocacy related to education for adults, and what does advocacy look like in your organizations? And I would invite, open answer on this one as well.
Well, advocacy is a major part of our work. We all are involved in that before Trump, even after Trump, and all that. It's the way that it's about educating the public, educating the legislators, educating the funders about what the needs are for the people we serve. It's and it happens at every level. One of the reasons that we hire people from the communities that we serve is that they speak their languages, and they could also speak on behalf of their clients. We are empowering our clients to advocate on their own behalf. And we also participate in many different in a larger group with other organizations, to have a larger advocacy group, so that we could go, for example, to Olympia. We could meet with our legislators. We could meet with our council members in here at the city, at the county, and also I think what is needed is advocacy. Everything that we do with respect to refugees and immigrants, I consider that as adult education or education for youth. All of our programs is about system navigation. It's education. It's about learning how to serve the system within behavioral health, within domestic violence, within employment, business, everything that we do within the high schools and early learning centers and all that. So we need additional funding for refugees and immigrants. And I understand we were in Olympia last week and understand that the state level, there is a shortage of funding. But at least if they could during this period, I think all we can ask from the government agencies is to keep our funding at the same level. But from the philanthropy, the ask is help us advocate on our behalf so that we can get the funding that is needed to cover the shortcoming of the government funds, so that we can continue our work. I think everything that we do, every step that we take, all of our program is about adult education and education for children. And, I always say that we serve people from cradle to golden ages. So everyone in the family. So, and everything that we do is about education.
Yeah, you've covered it so well, thinking about advocacy, especially rising up to the state level. So I want to just turn it around and bring it down to advocacy for that one person again. And that's, I think, a place where philanthropy can really come in. I'll just share a story. When this fall, when we were starting our women's only English program, a woman came in the door who I knew from years ago. I hadn't seen her for a long time. And she's a Somali woman who worked faithfully to work nights so that her kids could get through school. And she's so proud of the people that they're becoming. She's lived in our community for 20 years. She's become a citizen and done all that. But she said, I want to come back. I want to learn, because I can't, if people are telling me I should apply to get a better position in the company where I work, but I can't do it because I can't read very well. And so to me, I'm glad to welcome her into our program. We'll do what we can do, but if we had more staff, advocacy would be then going to her employer and finding out what are those unmet, what are those things that are the barriers for her that we can help her overcome so she can move up in her job. That one person to, move up. And it's amazing what these people will do for years and years, do the hard work so that their families can succeed. And we just don't have those, very rarely can they move up and keep on going themselves, because the sacrifices that they're making for their families, that as we all do, but it's harder in the immigrant community because the barriers are bigger and more. So that's kind of when I think of advocacy, I bring it down to the very personal level.
Can I just interject? Is that, as Teresa was mentioning, it just occurred to me that refugees and immigrant people are fraud people. I've been, as an example, I was in one meeting, one event, and we had the Somali ladies who used to take our immigrant in ESL classes. She came to me and she said, there were a lot of pamphlets on the table. She said, I can read. I can now read it. I can totally understand what they're saying. And she was so proud. And they really want to advance in their jobs. I mean, their refugees and immigrants are hardworking. Why? because there is, I mean, they start from ground zero and there is no way to go but going up. And they understand after a while when they're here that both family spouses have to work, they need to take care of their children. And so they work harder and they work more and they're committed to build a life, better foundation for their lives. So
And I think just adding to that, thinking that, you know, they've in their work, they've developed the oral language over time. So often it is after a long time that they come back and they're like, oh, now I've got the listening and the speaking piece down. Now I can really pay attention to the learning how to read, and those are exciting people to work with too.
Yeah, I would say that the way that we approach advocacy is kind of like what Munaz was saying, is all levels. That can be from teaching people in class know your rights and sending them out with a know your rights card in their language. That can be, here's employee rights in the United States or in Washington state. So when you go to an employer, you know how they should be treating you. Up to, we are part of a newly formed coalition called the Eastern Washington Refugee Coalition of 6 partner organizations. And, we're doing things like we're meeting with the mayor to talk about the impacts on our local community, and doing things like pressing the West Side to bring funds to Eastern Washington, which is, oftentimes they're locked in King County, and we want to see them move, because those communities are here and they need to be represented. So, I think advocacy can look like telling someone, hey, you can tell the doctor that you can't take an appointment at that time because you have ESL class, and that's a priority. So a lot of it is teaching people self-advocacy, right? In just their daily life, things that are very intuitive to us to be like, no, I work that day, I need to come at this time. Those are that power and autonomy of teaching people the culture and the knowledge so that they can be their own advocates in some ways. And then there's times where it's, someone comes to you, how do I respond to the teacher? Am I allowed to tell the teacher I don't like the way that they spoke to my child? Or, like teaching them how to interact in that kind of way with people that they're coming in contact with their daily life. So I think there's a lot of ways that we approach advocacy, and I'm sure that we all do this throughout the skills that we're teaching people. But I think we can think of advocacy as this big overarching thing, but really it can come all the way down to small everyday interactions where people can advocate for themselves to have the knowledge to do that.
that is part of our mission, right? To make sure that they get better.
Yeah.
But I think with respect to advocacy, we need all of our friends and the community to advocate on behalf of immigration and immigrants and refugees. Right now, it's a very difficult time for all of them.
Yeah.
We've been spending a lot of time on just developing a procedure of how to, if ICE attacks and comes to our buildings, how do we need to respond? How do we protect our clients? How do we protect our staff? So we need everyone in the community to advocate on behalf of refugees and immigrants, that they're not beasts. They're human beings who had to leave their countries. I'm sorry, I get very emotional about it. Because they had no other ways, right? Because they had no choice.
Yep.
I just want to, put an exclamation point in what she said. I was thinking about this morning as well. Like, okay, so we've had this executive order come down saying no one can come in. Well, what are we doing about it? Are we just sitting back and saying, oh yeah, well, there he goes again, we can't do anything about it? Or are we mobilizing ourselves and saying, no, I am going to contact my Republican congressman and saying, this is not right? Or whatever it takes. I think I need to do that. And I think we need to encourage one another to speak on behalf of the vulnerable, because it's kind of, it's more than sad, it's grievous what we're allowing our country to spiral down into. So
Mhm.
Thank you all for sharing so powerfully from your hearts and your work. And I think that's a good call up to the audience to help advocate for sure. It looks like we have one question, possibly. Gwen, wonder if you want to share?
Have our work group here all together, and it looked like there was a couple of questions, so I'll just let people jump in with them.
Most of you, or all of you, utilize volunteers in your organizations. My question is, do you require any specific training of your volunteers before they are either matched with students or integrated into your program?
We have the onboarding training for our volunteers, and we do a background check for all of our volunteers. And for example, volunteers who go to our STEM classes, they're being trained prior to them going to the STEM classes. Volunteers in our ESL classes are being trained before they get to the classes.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a similar process where a screening process, we do an interview, and then afterwards, whether they're going to be an ESL or working in another space in our organization, one of the things that we're including is a trauma-informed care kind of approach, because it's really important. Refugees are coming with trauma, but one of the things that people often don't know that don't work with this community is that they're going through a trauma being here right now, going into systems that are not made to actually help, not having a disconnect from community, and so there's actually this like disconnect that happens. And so it's really important that people understand that we're dealing with people that, even if you're just having conversation, it's like, what kind of conversations are appropriate? So maybe don't ask, why someone had to come here. So like cultural sensitivity, those are kind of things that we focus on for volunteers, aside from kind of general background check and interview process for us.
yeah, I would say it's ditto for us. I mean, we try to do ongoing training, especially for our volunteer ESL teachers. But yeah, it's always a work in progress. A lot of our initial training, especially around safety, personal safety and things like that, they're online. So
Looks like, and then Gwen, did you guys have any questions?
I think we're all done.
Okay, thank you. And then a question that came in from the audience that, yeah, maybe a resource that you could point us towards. It looks like Aviva pulled this up too, but where can we find or get a box of Know Your Rights cards?
Well, NERC, actually, we work closely with NERC, and they have all that information. There's also WAISN in here, WAISN, that, they have NERC has a lot of immigration attorney. WAISN has attorneys who could actually participate in court system for other issues in addition to application.
Yeah, and then the Catholic Legal Immigration Services, they have the Know Your Rights cards translated into multiple languages, and some of them the most common for us, like Arabic and Dari. So we took time this week to print and cut those out and then make them available to people to have, because we do know that people in Spokane have been detained as close as a mile away, and some of them have been some of our staff members' families. So this is something that we're trying to make readily available, and that's an easy way to even just educate yourself to know when something is happening, if you see it happening, you can be that advocate and say, this isn't legal, don't listen to them, intervene as if you need to. But yeah, the other ones that Manaz referenced as well are very good.
I think we are training our staff actually about know your rights so that they could train their clients.
Yep.
That's great. And we'll be sure to share these resources out as well. So those can be distributed. And I wonder, last question, do you all have specific trauma-informed trainers that you work with and that you would recommend? And you could maybe also email those to me and we can share out, but maybe just some ideas would be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy. I don't remember the name of the source right now that we use, but it's an online service and they also do in-person classes. And then there's another foundation that we work with that's putting together trauma-informed care for people that are immigrants and refugees. And so I don't have that resource available yet, but hopefully in the next couple of months it'll be ready, and happy to pass it along when it is.
We use our behavioral health counselors to do the trauma-informed care for the rest of the staff.
Yeah, we don't have anyone on our staff yet who does that. So we're looking at partnering with people at the local university and other places. So it's being developed.
Okay, thank you for those ideas. And I think we'll end here. I just want to share huge appreciation for your time and all the knowledge you shared with us. You are doing amazing work in the community all across the state, and we feel so grateful to have learned and shared in that work a little bit today. Feel free if you want to share your gratitude in the chat with our amazing panelists. They'd love to hear it. And we will be sure to share out these resources and this recording to all who registered. So thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day and practice some sort of advocacy today in your community.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys so much.